Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The title is Sacrificing Intellectual Precision for Collective Emotional Stability. I wanted to write more, but there wasn't space. Something very important about this idea is that I've noticed something, and usually I choose to focus on the evolutionary design, but the evolutionary design I consider as a certain program in the human consciousness. And it's like there's one way you're considering how you got here, then there's another mentality where now that you're here, what do you do? Right? And I've noticed that we're a species that was unconscious and it became conscious of itself. And once it had an objective grasp of its being, it moved on towards the subjective. Its subjectivity became a sort of world inside a world that it could control. That means in my talks, when I speak about free will, for me, it's as if it's very obvious certain things the person doesn't have free will. You didn't have it's kind of like some people I heard Christopher Hitchens kind of say we have free will because we have no choice. And what that means is the way consciousness has emerged. uh, Excuse me, to continue, the way consciousness has emerged is that it has emerged as a sort of opportunity. It's as if kind of like before I was born, there was various systems of intelligence. And I don't know how to say it. I'm just saying that we have free will in moving what we have created in our reality. I can choose to want one day for the whole planet to rotate the other way than the way it is. But I see that choice doesn't happen. Just because I want it doesn't happen. But when it comes to me wanting to turn my head around, I can totally turn my head the other direction, you know? So it's as if kind of unconscious movement of nature became conscious of itself. It has free will, enough free will to know that it doesn't have free will, in a macrocosmic scale. That means there's two factors that are very important because uh, it's kind of like the integrative relationship between the individual and its space, and also the evolutionary. So on one level, things are integrating. On another level, they're updating and changing. So it's kind of like integrative evolution. The idea of the title, sacrificing intellectual precision for collective emotional stability. I kind of noticed that I was really looking at things. I started these talks in 2014, and ever since it's kind of like my mind has opened to questions. It's as if there was a certain time I thought the wealth of life was just in how physical phenomena was being administered. And then I realized no, that there is more, that the attention moves the worlds behind our eyes. So I looked at human beings, I looked at societies that I had access to, and I saw that human beings are playing costume games, language games, as if we are masking ourselves in language to appear in certain ways, but in reality, many people in society, the civilization is it's like a civilization is inefficient when the psychology of the members of that civilization are fragmented. And the more fragmented your psychology becomes, it's as if you're wanting more dimensions out of the world, and after some point you can't handle. So it's as if it's like instead of telling someone not to have a desire, It's to say, kind of like reduce some of your desires. And the ability to change really changes you. That means when you see it can be done, you will do it. When you see there's a more efficient view that you can exist in, and that view upon like your whole intelligence and the world. So it's kind of like I'm saying we are in the driver's seat, but we weren't the engineers of the car. You know, nature has a unique and unknown engineering to it. And because I consider myself a natural being, uh, that same unknown resides in my breath when I wonder why my eyes are open in the day. And sometimes you can wonder experientially. That means you look at something without wanting anything back. The experience is just movement. It's like, think of it this way: your brain is like a classical musical orchestra, and your attention in the moment is the conductor, and the conductor moves his stick like a wizard of music. To control the moment of evocation. So I'm pretty much saying I kind of realized the relationship human beings have. We're in the era of idea worship. You know, I mean, I've declared 2020. We can say we've officially kind of stepped, like we've put our foot on the other stepping stone in the river, as we're trying to get across in history. I thought it was an intellectual solution. I thought that we needed to have a model or a structure or a new system in place. And then I realized even if we had the most advanced civilization, would the members of the civilization be advanced enough to attend to it? And so that would mean that we would have to transition from seeking intellectual precision. That means it's like there's an effort of human beings in trying to translate what all this phenomena is through words. Okay, where a lot of knowledge lives in. That means language is like the world of knowledge, you know? And what language is when a human being decided to allow the value of one state of mind to linger into other moments. For example, that moment you're writing a message on a phone random like phone call, like somebody's asking you to leave a message for somebody else. And so in that second, what's going on? You're just writing down the message. You are trying to keep the value of the content that was present in one moment throughout this changing world, you know? And you can say the same way we are trying to not change in a changing world. It's like the same. The Sufis would say, trying to just in kind of through a linear and intellectual approach and filtered approach in accordance to the past to find the truth is like whipping a dead donkey to run faster. What that means is the moment a certain level of authenticity leaves, the intelligence becomes artificial. When the intelligence becomes artificial, it's as if the mind doesn't trust what it's doing, you know? And so that's the thing, that the whole point of where the position that the human being is now is that we have consciousness, you know. Consciousness came with the package, and consciousness is really how a species, after billions of years, is not only able to see itself, is not only able to articulate its environment in a very advanced kind of linguistic way. I say language as a technology. It's just that we have more engagement with our vision, and it's as if we were when you look at history, it has been not just the evolution of people, but it has been the evolution of many of the games, of many programs, many things, that it's like that person, sure, they were somebody, but that body moved in the world and therefore had some sort of influence. And human beings have two sorts of value, an objective value and a subjective value. What that means is when you look at others, they appear as an object to you. But when you look at yourself, of course, in the mirror, when you see yourself, you're an object. But when you wonder who's looking out through your eyes, you see at most you contain it subjectively. Rene Descartes, in his approach, in his methodical doubt, this dude was pretty much like, I'm going to doubt everything until I find the ultimate truth. You know? And so Rene Descartes went on this doubt to come to a conclusion that he cannot doubt the isolated thinking subject. That means he cannot doubt the doubter. Do you know? It's a sort of paradoxical moment. It's kind of like how Carl Jung spoke about the animus and the anima. I don't know how much people like my viewpoint of that is that Carl Jung was simply pointing to human beings, that there is a sort of moment in the state of being where it's like through the process of disengagement, there is witnessing of both realms untouched. So it's like we are creatures identifying with the matter in the space. There will be a moment where we will be the space on the identifying with the matter within us, the content, the phenomenological content of the experience. And I find what it is honestly, it's like a navigation of a plane of existence. So what does that mean? That means it's like you open your eyes in the morning, you're this entity on a rock in the middle of nowhere. The cosmos is so mysterious, everybody has a reason to freak out. But it's at the same time, I don't know, I'm just trying to say that it's not too linear. For me, it's not just technological advancement, there's something missing from the picture. And for a long time, until 2000, this year, guys, I found the answer to this question. It was one of those ultimate questions in my mind where I'm like, if civilization, if 8 billion people for a second were in sync, like for a second they could have their attention on the same language, on the same view would that be? And I eventually realized it's emotional stability. That means what I consider more advanced, like every person, of course, whatever they do, they're standing on the shoulders of giants. Everybody's like this. There's no achievement done that is not on that has not been on the shoulder of some giant. That means it's like Elon Musk inspires the next Elon Musks. He is the giant where the next Elon Musks are going to be like on his shoulder. Emotional stability means that we have to make our all our rationality and intellectual precision of all our educational systems secondary into this recognition that really what the civilization appears to be is that it's this giant boat. And so I want every person listening for a second imagine that instead of us being on a rock in the middle of space, in the middle of nowhere, we are on this giant, even more bigger than it's like 10 times, like way more bigger than Noah's Ark, and we're on this giant, huge ship that at the center of the ship you can't even see the edges. And so this giant ship is navigating 8 billion people, passengers. And so some people of this ship have noticed there's a hole. There are holes in the ship. And so they can't even have a moment where they can ask. At most they can say, "Hey guys, there's a hole here," and then run towards the hole to attend to it, you know? So it's kind of like this idea of realizing that even though we live singular lives, that the destiny of this genetical lineage that we're all obsessively as creatures trying to continue is the same. That means it's as if um, life is so fascinating that it's kind of like I was for a long time I was asking myself, what is DNA? Like, how would God perceive DNA? And I felt it was as if like in my youth I was considering like let me tell you, Aristotle has this idea where he says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. And so what Mr. Within would tell you is that navigate through language. So everything I speak about, I consider a distance between who I am and what that phenomena is. So at most, communication is like the silence is an empty canvas, and as you communicate, you sequentially evoke context and words, and eventually you'll get a sense of how language, once the vision is there, pours out. That means, let me tell you, there's like different kinds of poets in history. There's the poet who needs the experience to happen first, and there's a poet who, before attaining any sort of experience, is feeling a nostalgia, is feeling a hidden calling, as if a hidden gravitational pull from behind the eyes, that every subject known to man and every object where every subject is standing on, it is hovering in the presence of the unknown. That means the unknown is the most important thing to acknowledge. And so that's the thing in regards to how emotional stability, and I've said collective emotional stability, why is that necessary? That means, like, when you really go look at what the great people in history said, they were kind of being like a response to the messed up stuff that was happening at that time, like the challenges they had to confront. But when they wondered about their children's children, they did not see chaos. They did not see non existence. They saw something in the void. And so to live on for the meaning that can be found is also an ultimate endeavor, you know? There was this, I don't know if I think it was like, I don't know where I read it, but like it was this idea where this person was kind of like people in the past had written a letter for the future generations. And the people in the past said, "We died for you, but you will give us eternal life." That means it's like what we're doing as a civilization is just marching in this unknown void towards how can I tell you, a sort of blueprint or model of what is potentially. It's like, let me tell you, when something becomes important for you, anytime something is real, your that intelligence you had in the kind of, you can say, is hidden dormant in your DNA when you were in your environment. You know, when there was a time where our species was in the food chain, we became lions, kings of the jungle, without having, you know, uh, the paws and like the jaw of a lion. It was the mind that roared louder than any animal because it was an ability to acknowledge what was there. To give an example of this, okay, I was trying to just get to how many people in history had spoken about that we need to have tolerance and charity. And why do you think the Dalai Lama has gone on a full marketing campaign of compassion? Is because when there is compassion, there is the authorization, enough safety for genius to step out. There is one view that we look at the planet and we say, okay, there's stupid and smart people. Okay. Another way is to say, wait a minute, no, 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 no. That's a static interpretation. The dynamic interpretation is that there is no such thing as stupid and smart. We're all just movement we're atoms in space, as the secular society considers. So atoms in space don't need to be freaking about anything. But that thing that is concerned is like the animate potential of the life, as if like we are a candle that is burning and the wax is burning, right? It's like the wax is the biological human body, and the glow of the candle is consciousness, right? And it's like this candle that, like, when it goes to sleep, it kind of like its light just becomes dim, let's say. When you look at the human body, it heals itself. When you look at human morality, it is an effort through empathy of kind of bringing forth a more, um, how can I tell you, if they told me, if there were two treasures in front of you and they said one of them is the treasure of the heart and the other is the treasure of the mind and like the intellect, which one would you want? Which treasure would you want? Okay? If they asked me, I would instantly say treasure of the heart. Because let me tell you why. Even though right now many archetypes I navigate through are more toward the mind. That means I've honestly throughout the years giving these talks become a bit insensitive to, like, certain individual realms of my own personal experience. But it's like, we live for the vision. We live for the vision. Vision is the ultimate. The treasure chest that holds the heart. Let's say you open the treasure chest that holds the gift of the treasure of the mind, let's say. So that treasure of the mind will at most potentially be an infinite, complex, multidimensional movement. But the treasure that has the heart is going to the source. Going to the source. That means it's like we sometimes that we are unknown movements and receivers of life. That means for a second think that every human being, their brain is an antenna. And who knows? Who knows what they are tuning into? Who knows what world they see? It's like that's kind of the beautiful thing about language. That it's as if I am in my own room, you are in your own room, yet both of our rooms are in the same house. It's like Earth is our house and we are in different rooms. We have access to different ways of extrapolating it. It's kind of like pretty much life is doing nothing, or if you do something, that something is like a push or a pull. It's a give or a take. And ultimately, movement is the evocation of the dualistic realms. That means the concept of movement wouldn't exist if the idea of the self and the world weren't separate. By the way, guys, as I'm giving these talks, whoever's listening, I'd appreciate if you um, write where you're listening from, and feel 100% open to engage what I'm saying. Treat these live streams as sort of kind of like the School of Athens. You can come and shout at Plato any moment. In debate, in the spirit of rhetoric. Language is something that it's like a car. If you don't know how to drive it, if you're not familiar with the system, of course you're going to be awkward when you're driving it. You won't have that kind of driver's certainty that settles in, that kind of becomes a sort of intuitive muscle memory of just whenever you enter a car, you have a certain precise awareness of everything. So eventually it's like that man who's been driving a taxi for 30 years, he and the car are the same. It's as if you ask him what's like, he's like the car drives itself at this point. Because I am so comfortable with every dimension of the movement of the vehicle, because I've been exposed to it, but the person suddenly thinks that, you know what I mean? So it's same with language. It's same with subjective content, not just the movement of objects, but the movement of subjects. Now, something unique happens. When you relate two subjects, there is an emptiness. And when you relate two objects to one another, there's an emptiness. But when you relate an object to a subject or a subject to an object, there's infinite realms of potential, uh, archetypal extension. Like the archetypes can emerge, senses of self can emerge. I'm simply saying that you're your attention, and that attention is experiential. And this is why the treasure of the heart was not a story to satisfy. It's like your mind, after it satisfies that material thirst, it's going to wonder about what else is there. That what else is there will require it to contemplating how the mind's architecture was. So think of life as something where you're running up a mountain in your youth. And when you're running up this mountain, your mind is your mistakes and everything. And that life you live is kind of being the architecture. It's like a house coming in with a certain design to it. And when the person gets older, the life they have lived is like this vast architecture that they live in. It's like a vast house that they live in. And so it is kind of at that moment the one's relationship with their memories will change. It will change into joy. We can say somebody who suffers or is stressed, or we see rises in the statistics of depression around the world. What is that? It's like that's as if somebody who in the moment is not content with how things are. It's like I remember saying it in one of my talks. It's like, you know, you can have as much hope as you want, but it doesn't make sense to push a building. Just with your hands going and pushing the building and thinking you're going to move this building. Right? So there is a sort of, I don't know, I'm just saying our minds, our subjective realms are focused on kinda intellectual precision, raw evidence, kinda exact modes of acceptance of certain phenomenology. It's as if the scientist denies, for example, that yogi in the cave getting some sort of experience, right? And the scientist is like, no, unless you can prove to me on with mathematics and measurement what the Atman is, I won't believe in this unless you can show me. And here's the concept: how can you show your own eyes to yourself? How can you show something that's being? That means eventually, I think the self inquiry process in the mystical view gets to a point where you realize how can you look for your own eyes when you're looking through them, right? It's no longer an ascension or trying to get somewhere. It's just realizing you are being. Whatever you have done, it's being right now. You know, I have a respect for the air that goes in my lungs as if it's like, sort of daily messengers have entered the kind of the king's throne room. I think there is an opportunity cost to wherever direction the attention goes. And attention is kind of like like you can say the content of the mind is like the surfboard, and the attention is the surfer. And what happens in the world is the overall kind of waves moving things. To claim free will means we had to be free from the beginning. That means we will, in any existential situation, if we feel the cosmos is not dependent on us, we are dependent on the cosmos, we will automatically feel we don't have a sort of the individual free will is a hallucination for actually a very macrocosmic, collectively held system, right? So whether you go through it towards the gate of infinity or you go through it towards through the gate of the void, whichever visits you as a human being on this life first, you know. That means you can have an experience where your subjective realms are very vivid and manifest and active, and you can also be in a way where your subjective realms is not active, your objective realm. That means if you have externalized your imagination into movement in reality. So it's kind of saying like the same effort I'm using to visualize, for example, I close my eyes and visualize, like, I don't know, a giant glowing like golden sphere in front of me, in the room. I'm visualizing this in where imagination happens, right? So as I imagine this, I see this visualization regardless of what the activity was. It was an effort through the beam of attention. It was energy being attention to how it's expressing, right? So eventually, once a person their eyes truly experientially open up beyond the language threshold, they begin to realize that there is something unknown and living that is the main. It's like the point of the known. So what that means is it's kind of strange. You start it's like the beginning of it's like youth. You're I don't know. Let me say it like this. It's like you start off as an individual, uh, as a sort of conscious objective individual. And as the conscious objective individual is experienced, eventually, if we claim that there is some sort of will, that will tend to update the system. That means if you really wonder what the free will is, the free will is how the human being, after stepping out of the food chain, separated itself from the environment. That means just taking this idea that an animal in the forest is living inside its imagination. Its imagination is its ecosystem, you know? It is its environment that is like the kind of language of its expression, right? So if we were still in the forests and we hadn't come into cities, there potentially we might have looked totally different as physical beings, and at the same time use different percentage of the brain, you know? So it's as if, like, in nature, the being's brain or the being's subjective realm is how the overall objective realm keeps it occupied. But the human being who can navigate its attention through various elevations suddenly finds multiple truths in the same void. That means it's as if a person looked at God, I'll kind of animate a story here. A person went to heaven, and in heaven, the voice of God was there, and the person's like, okay, now I'm in heaven, God, let me ask a question. And God was like, sure, this is heaven, you can ask, you know. And the person says, God, why did you create emptiness? Why did you create an ending? That means when somebody wants to create something, why make it temporary? And why have emptiness? Pretty much the dude's asking God in heaven why there should be emptiness. And of course, guys, I'm saying this not in a derogatory way. I'm just simply animating what I'm trying to say. And God responds because we need a door to this house. Emptiness is either a portal or it is nothing that we would be able to consciously conceive. Kind of how Socrates, before he had to kind of drink that poison and kind of transition physically out of this plane, he said to the people who were there that I will go from this moment. He said something like those who kind of um, punished me or something, like those who attacked me, like they will have to kind of dwell in material existence. But I will go somewhere where I will either go to a place where there will be no Socrates, where he's famously known to say this, Socrates, no Socrates, like a state where there is no self, you know? Or I would go to a place where all the answers that I've wanted, to all the questions I had in this life will be answered, something like that. So, what he means is that after the stability of this plane of existence, there's infinity and the void. And to discover the nature of attention, of how it's void and infinite, and how the mind, it's like, sure, you can in one sense think every moment is a different sense of self, or you can feel the mind is simply happening as an expression before time, before language, before any sort of context, before any way the person, human being's mind could become a character in a story. There was just a sort of presence of expression. It's as if the sun's, we think every beam of the sun is like one of the sun's personalities. No, the sun is beyond that beam. It is the giver of it. And when you really wonder who is giving value to my moment right now, you'll discover the mirror of existence. You'll revert back to your divine remembrance and natural intuition. So what that means is you're the inner child. You understand why it exists. You reach a point where the conscience doesn't exist because the being doesn't is experientially not separate. Is not is I don't want to say it's a sort of futuristic um, futuristic integration of individual will into a collective expression, but it's kind of like either there's more or there isn't. Either language is limited or it is not. Either this world is the known is moving the unknown or the unknown is moving the known. If the known is moving the unknown, life is a simulation, hallucination. Don't freak out. It's a phenomenology of nature. If there is something more, then we shall dare as a species explore it. For me, unless we arrive towards a new model for civilization, that considers that human beings are tourists in this plane of existence. And what does that mean? That means we should care for the journeying experience of human beings. And what's ridiculous to me is that if you think about it, first of all, we have no choice, but all the resources of the species are on this planet, right? Now, what we have done is we have built separate nations. We have built separate nations. These separate nations are kind of, it doesn't make sense for me. This is kind of a strange thing to say, but the concept of a nation seems to me to be an intellectually inefficient idea, you know? Because if you think about it, if all these nations were sub-nations, they didn't even have to change. They just assumed they were sub-nations of a kind of collective overall united nation, you know that would mean a kind of civilization that's fragmented is developing, but simultaneously all of it's being considered in a unity. So why is this necessary? That means the borders that are physically between countries should become more internal, and human beings will be ushered into an era of a new era of civility and sophistications of life sensitivity. We have to, I find, immediately as a species consider that there's this, first of all, there's the subjective realm. And every person is starting off from first having access to what their eyes allow. And I think it is the most humbling and brilliant thing a species can do to to take advantage of its limitation. And it's as if the limitations of people unite them towards the limitless. It tends to be that way generally, you know. That means I could say that when one discovers the presence of their attention in you, when one realizes that regardless of what the world says, there is a voice that is them. That voice is divinity, strangely. What brings the ego and moves it and transitions beyond it is the divine. And it's kind of realizing as if nature is being with itself. We are the eyes of nature that self claim personalities only through a sort of linguistic simulation of a relationship with objectivity. How important is it for the inner realms to be shared? How valuable is it for the inner realms to be shared? That means this is kind of the picture I'm seeing, and I'm just some guy in a universe with a billion trillion stars. Like honestly, there's nothing more surreal than reality. There's nothing more surreal than existence, really. I think it's like, tell me what is more divine than just being here rather than not being here as a phenomenon. Like, that is, life is strangely a gift of vision on its the moment it is alive. The inner realms, once the person realizes they're not a thought, um, they can observe well. I feel you get a sort of crystal precision in observance. Once you find a sort of contentment that you are observing phenomena before acting, and that observance is a subtle action. And that subtle action is being a definition of being for, it's as if like um, something that appears static in the conscious mind, it could be totally a dynamic thing in non-conscious, and vice versa, you know. There's 8 billion minds. Most people live silent and self-obsessed lives. We don't have even a good story to tell our future generations about what civilization is. We have ignorance in regards to resource distribution, and rather than quickly bringing some sort of efficient, peaceful kind of civilization to quickly become interstellar, we're still fighting over toys that we already own as a species. You know, it's as if, like, before the concept of ownership, it's as if everything is for everyone. But realistically, the way society has been made, it's that it's like deep value systems are ingrained in like the psyche of the civilization. That's like what the economical sector is. It is a pattern. It's remarkable how it's like just like a person in a helicopter. There was this remarkable painter. I don't know what his name was, but he was on a helicopter and he saw a city and he memorized. He instantly had access to all the images, and he drew the city exact. And they compared his drawing to like the actual picture of the city, and it was like ridiculous. From that aerial view, we are not taking evolution seriously. We have distracted ourselves out of our own natural evolution. Imagine in like hundreds of cyberspace culture, and the people in that cyberspace culture, they don't know if they're in a virtual reality simulation or not. And so it's as if it becomes a sort of, sometimes I say technology is repeating a mystical pattern. Technology is like the spirituality of objectivity, you know. The spirituality of matter and particles and elements. It's like how they become animated into becoming stuff. That emotional stability, I'll tell you a Zen story. There were these two Zen monks. After lunch, they've gone by the river to clean their dishes or bowls, these wooden bowls they would give them, kind of. And as they're eating, as they finish eating and they go by the river, it's these two friends, these two Zen monks. And so as they get by the river, one of them suddenly sees a scorpion, like a ignorant tourist has made a wrong turn and is being pushed by the waves of the river. So instantly, one of the friends that's there quickly gets his cup and scoops up the scorpion and saves technically the scorpion's life. Now I don't know how insects survive in water, but like, but anyways, he saves the scorpion. In that moment, the scorpion stings him, and the friend's like, "Holy shit, this guy just got stung by a scorpion." The friend, kind of, when he scooped up the scorpion, he dropped the bowl when the scorpion stung him, so the scorpion is in the center of the bowl. So he goes to kind of free the scorpion just comes in, it's like freaked out, the scorpion is like freaked out, you know, and it stings the guy again. So this friend's like, on the other side being like, whoa, did this guy just get stung by a scorpion twice? And he looked and he says, my friend, why are you trying to save that scorpion when you know its nature is to sting? Think of all the archetypes of evil. And the friend is smiling strangely. Usually, when the scorpion stings you twice, people, I don't think, at least they won't be smiling. You know, but this man is smiling. He's smiling with a fearless soul in the moment. And he looks at his friend and he says, just like how it is the nature of that scorpion to sting, it is my nature as a human being to save that scorpion. And it means it is the multi-leveled empathy of living. That means it's like in certain cultures, for example, in India for me is the fact that so many people are vegetarian there is remarkable. And I think it's blessed. Now, if we ascribe consciousness to plants, then it'd be like, oh my God, we're killing plants now. But really, what it is certain cultures had this view that if the creature experiences emotion, you should not kill it. That means if it's, for example, it's like life deserves to continue. That means every person your mind has ever fathomed as an opponent or an enemy, it's as if, trust me, time is the ultimate killer. Or excuse my language, I'll say time is the ultimate conqueror of the elemental position of the human being. That means it was this like kind of humorous joke, in a long enough timeline, everything goes extinct. That means if you really think super into the, like, it's okay to think about like tomorrow what the person's going to do, or like maybe like in a couple months have a plan or something. But when it comes to thinking about like, I don't know, like, I don't know, let's say 300,000 years later, then you realize it's like it's like the unfathomable doesn't, you worry about the unfathomable. Not that you need to worry about the unfathomable, but I'm saying like abide by your nature. That's Ramana Maharshi's wisdom. Meditation is your true nature. And what is this true nature? It is the simple presence of experience prior to the indirect encapsulation of meaning through linguistics, through symbol attribution. Language is neither just sound, and it is neither just uh, symbol attribution. It is a technology. What that means is let's say if a sword, like back in the day in gladiator times, like in a gladiator arena or something, the sword was their weapon. So it's as if everybody had access to the sword. The sword was like the individuality of the soldier on the battlefield, the weapon it held, you know? So there was a sword, and so now different soldiers used the sword differently. Different warriors wielded the sword differently. Some warriors even wielded the sword. They even wielded their mind like a weapon first, without killing, without fighting. They kind of solved the fight. They defeated the opponent without touching the opponent. That's like when your mind is the great has is your the precision of your vision is beyond brutal kind of inefficiency to both sides. This is why I think about like I was so like a part of me got so shocked. Have you ever opened a history book and been shocked? I mean, like everyone's gonna be like, yeah, always. But I'll tell you, it's like you get kind of shocked at how many people, for example, died in World War II. And it's like it was like, I don't know, above 50 million people died in World War II, and it was like when you kind of take that in, it was like more than any moment in history recorded. More, you know, than all the recorded kind of wars in history because of the population. So imagine out of 50 million, how many of those human beings were philosophers, engineers, teachers, husbands, wives, kind of like children. It's like how many, I mean, children, not children, but you know what I mean? It's like they were potential of minds to be something. And it's like a lot of life right now, we have to kind of endure the roughness of it, which is that it's like the right stage. Civilization is not advanced enough to come to the individual. Hopefully, we will get to create a civilization that realizes giving resources to the individual allows the greatest resource, the mind of the human being, to reach its greatest potential. Plus, at the same time, a wave of automation is going to hit the world. And so, pretty much in the business realm, it's going to become something very strange. It's like no longer humans are being employed. Why? Because the machine doesn't need to sleep. The machine doesn't need to get paid. It's just you plug it to the wall. So what I'm trying to say is that eventually we are kind of being pushed by our decisions as a species towards becoming inevitably as minds. And what that means is eventually being a mental being will become more significant than being an objective being. So then, when it comes to the true, like when it comes to transitioning consciousness from a biological kind of moment into a technological and artificial one, like super advanced technology at that point, it would be a sort of relationship where we are individuality. We, like right now, we're feeling more like bodies in our waking state than we are feeling as like overall a collective field of mind, you know? But I feel there will come a time where it will be the opposite. And when we evolve beyond individual consciousness, ultimately collective consciousness will have to display itself. Life, it's like in this part of existence, this is how it goes. But necessarily doesn't mean existence is in one room only. Vision is an opportunity for that that which doesn't know if it's eternal or temporal to realize. Because as far as I remember, the sense of self I've had, it has changed through life. And not only I have changed, my world has changed too. So it's as if in a symbiosis of world changing and man, the self changing, it's like, that's the kind of landscape we're interpreting, where it's like there's not just the voice of your intelligence, but your environment is like a part of your imagination, part of your vision. Reality is given imagination. This sacrifice of intellectual precision means that in a moment where we have different minds in a room, which is kind of like what civilization is like, these minds in the room, they can choose to each begin going with the truth of their inner realm. So that means it's like three people in a room and each feel like what they see is the only thing that's real, right? They're not even considering the other has other viewpoints. Now, the sacrifice is the opportunity cost of kind of like that moment where that you can for your own gratification, like how can I tell you, it's like it's kind of fascinating, guys. Sometimes when I give these talks, in the moments where I'm pausing in between, the thoughts move faster. It not that the thoughts move faster, it's as if like just like how the person can visualize a shape, just imagine a shape, you can also imagine that shape moving. So in the same way, you can not only see phenomena, but that the phenomena can be animated in accordance to how your attention navigates in this plane of existence as the plane of existence. Uh, I wanted to thank the viewers, of course. Without an audience, it's as if one has never spoken, to be honest. When time moves forward and it's really about efficient vision being implemented in the simplest shortcut way, and inefficient vision to be reduced whatever percentage it is. That means think of life as kind of like before a person has succeeded or before a person has failed. It's like the person is, there's an option between collision or continuity. There will eventually come an objective collision for all human beings. Now, how the subjectivity will collide, I think, has to do with the type of life you live and how much your experience, your direct experience of life has been your teacher. You see, there's some things that I have learned from my objective realms, and there are certain things I've learned from my subjective realms. Ultimately, I've noticed the self in both of these realms is the same, even though their dimensions appear different, even though, like, it's two different sides of a coin, it's the same coin. When we can put aside the archetypes, have acknowledge the language threshold, acknowledge the linguistic simulation, rather than people rudely communicating, having an efficient use of language. Imagine nobody, people go into this kind of serene silence, and before speaking, the person considers and calculates the speech. Just observes it, you know. There is such there are hidden libraries in an instant of observance. I can tell you, so much of life is happening as it is. You know, there's like just the body heals itself. You know, it's as if the you can say the wonder of the human soul is how the mind heals itself. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste. Sincerity is the ultimate road, and the gates to this road are from within. When one trusts life, life has an authorization to advance. If we create a civilization where people can trust it and the civilization, however it's being governed, can trust the people, then it will be no longer win-lose because it's ego or whatever. It becomes win-win. It would be a moment where we would, just like how human beings took off their top hats. There was a time in certain cultures in Europe, people wore top hats all the time. It was like that was the baseball cap of back then, you know? And so they wore these top hats, but one day one dude was like, "What is this on my head?" And he threw the top hat into the air. And the moment he threw it, some other guy who was irritated with the hat being on his head for so long was like, "Yeah, what is this on my head?" You know, he threw it too. And eventually people were playing frisbees with their own hats as a sign of freedom and revolution, cultural revolution, you know, throwing your top hat into the air, you know. So similarly, the way we're acknowledging ourselves as thoughts is like that top hat. It's a mask. Language is masking an unknown experiencer. And this is the cool thing, because it's an unknown experiencer. What can knowledge do? What can knowledge do when it's a moth around this flame? If it goes too into the flame, it will cease to exist. If it is distant from the flame, it gets to see the flame, and kind of it's between two worlds. You know, so it's kind of like I'm telling you, your attention is uh, the most divine thing of your moment. When you realize it, it's like free will is not just um, uh, it's like you can do certain things. Free will even reaches a point where it's as if like you can say uh, there could have. It's like what caused the Big Bang. It's in other words, what was the first? What started the first movement? You know, what ignited manifestation? You know, into being, because that's kind of in some sense it's a giant ignition explosion, and then a vast cooling down of this explosion. And it's as if always you can never have a character in a story without having an unknown world there. That it's like you need an empty page to write on. We require non-existence to contemplate moments of existence from. Hence, you know, what Zen masters did. So, yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. I felt I had to share these last things. And it is worth caring for a communication. I'm learning this still. You know, it's nobody's perfect, but I'm still learning this, that it's so much more important, rather than me being in moments, rather than me adding intense unnecessary intensity into the moment. I respect the simplicity of how other human beings have found the stability in the environment, you know? So it's like no longer just caring for your own mind in the room, it's caring for all the minds in the room. That's the cool part. That's the next advanced part. You know, that's what the you know, the coolest thing an individual can do. Study your vision. It is the beginning of all potential greatness. It is the beginning. Find the empty page to your moment, and then you'll see why there's free will. Because there's something that can be an effort in the void. That effort in the void, we can choose to kind of put the three dimension into two-dimensional language, or we can just consider that the dimensions surpass the language. That's why I created the concept of the language threshold, because it's like we had to find that we had to kind of distinguish the same way. Like Carl Sagan shared this story, and he was sharing it as a relay from some other person who had written this story. But there was this kind of idea of the Flatlanders, the Flatlander society, a society of two-dimensional beings, like squares, triangles, and circles. You know, now one day in this society, in this flatlands where these geometrical 2D shapes are living, they suddenly see out of nowhere a giant square appeared. And everybody's like, is this a miracle? Everybody in that flatland is like, how is this possible? This goes beyond all the sciences of our flatland educational systems. Like, what is this? It appears alien. Even though they can comprehend it, they can see this giant square that has appeared in flatland out of nowhere, like teleported kind of there. But we suddenly see that in a three-dimensional way, somebody put a cube. Somebody put a cube on a table, and it was like, oh my God, out of nowhere, this square appeared. And imagine that square suddenly being taken away, and the person putting the square in another place, you know? And it's like, oh my God, instant teleportation. But what it is it has a three-dimensional explanation. So it's as if forever till the end of time, everything has a more advanced explanation. So I'm telling you, eventually, regardless of how advanced our technologies become, technology can become endlessly advanced. We have to care about the journey of the human experience, and emotional stability prioritize over intellectual kind of sharp precision of how things rationally should be. I'm telling you, society is not a rational place, 100% rational place, and it's not a 100% irrational place. It is just where attention is using various data patterns to function, to process reality. The winds of evolution are moving within every being's eyes. This is why it's like you when you realize your moment is being your mind and your mind is being your moment and they were never separate. It's as if kind of like earth was in heaven and heaven was in a state where it was never a dichotomy, never a dualistic thing, never a fall or a rise. It was serenity's acceptance of what it was, what it is, and a sort of being that it has nothing else to compare itself to. So it is pure being. Thanks for tuning in, guys.